Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most exciting aspects of Jujutsu Infinite, the cursed techniques. There are so many awesome cursed techniques in this game, but here's the catch. They're not exactly easy to roll for. With limited rolls, getting your hands on the perfect CT can feel like a challenge, but that's part of the thrill, right? Plus, the game has introduced these amazing extra cursed technique slots, and trust me, they can totally change the game. Imagine mixing skills to create some of the most broken builds possible, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. In this video, we'll break down which cursed techniques are the absolute best and what they pair well with. Whether you're a fan of powerful attacks or strategic buffs, we've got the scoop on how to make your build shine. Some of these combos are so strong, they can make you feel like a true powerhouse. So stick around as we go over all the insane synergies you won't want to miss in Jujutsu Infinite. Let's jump in and see how you can dominate with the most devastating cursed techniques. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking cursed techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching! The cursed techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blazing Courage, Construction, Cloning Technique, and Tool Manipulation. Alright, so let's dive into the C-tier cursed techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. The ones that, well, aren't exactly lighting up the battlefield but still have some perks. First up, we've got Blazing Courage. Now, this one is a bit of an oddball. It's a solid step up from the commons, no doubt. But here's the catch. There's really no combo potential, and the skill list is kinda underwhelming. You might find it useful in certain situations, but when it comes to raw damage, it's just not pulling its weight. Next, we've got Construction. It's got that decent range, and the single target moves aren't terrible, but it kind of hits a wall after that. Unfortunately, it has zero synergy with other cursed techniques, which means you're kind of on your own with this one. And when you start comparing it to rare CTs, there's just no real reason to pick this over something more powerful. It's like having a solid, reliable car that's still not as fast as a sports car. Why bother? Now, let's talk about Cloning Technique. It's not the worst, but it definitely doesn't blow anyone away. On the plus side, it's got a pretty solid 1v1 moveset, and the mobility's okay too. But here's the issue. The damage is really low, and there's absolutely no AoE. If you're facing a group, this technique might leave you feeling a little, well, helpless. It's definitely a borderline useless option when compared to others in its tier. And finally, we've got Tool Manipulation. The one big plus, Flight. It's hands down the best tool for map navigation, so if you're trying to cover ground quickly or get into tricky spots, this will help. But that's where the love ends. Outside of flying around, it's pretty much useless in combat. So if you're not using it to zip around the map, you might find yourself asking, is there anything else this can do? Spoiler, not much. The cursed techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Cryokinesis, Cursed Speech, Straw Doll, and Boogie Woogie. Alright, let's dive into some of the B-tier cursed techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. Now, these techniques might not be the absolute top dogs, but don't let that fool you. They've got their moments to shine if you know how to work with them. First up, we've got Cryokinesis. It's all about that crowd control, with some solid single-target freeze action that can really disrupt your opponent's flow. On top of that, it has some decent AoE moves and a mobility skill to boot. But here's the catch. When it comes to damage, it doesn't exactly pack the punch you'd expect. And let's not forget, it's usually outranged by most other cursed techniques, so you'll need to get up close and personal. Next on the list is Cursed Speech. This one is a great support technique, and it can lead to some killer combos when used right. However, patience is key here. The windups for its moves are pretty long, so you'll need to time it perfectly. And if you're relying on its range for anything, you're in for a bumpy ride. It's pretty limited unless you've got the megaphone to give you a little boost. Add in those long cooldowns, and you've got a technique that requires some careful planning. It's strong, but not the easiest to execute. Now, let's talk about Straw Doll. If you're all about combos, this one's a solid pick. Its range with nails and resonance is fantastic, and when you're looking to deal some serious damage, it delivers. However, there are a couple of drawbacks. All the CC moves are melee-based, which can be a little tricky in crowded or fast-paced fights. Plus, it lacks AoE, so you're not going to be clearing out mobs of enemies with this one. Oh, and don't forget, it requires some pretty good aim, so if you're not on point, you might miss those crucial hits. Lastly, we've got Boogie Woogie, which brings some insane mobility to the table. Seriously, you'll be bouncing around the map, dodging hits and keeping your enemies on their toes. The counterattacks are super useful, and if you've got a team that knows how to work with this, it can be a real game changer. But here's the rub. The damage output isn't anything to write home about. It's not the best in terms of raw offense, and without a solid offensive curse technique on your side, it can feel like you're just dancing around the battlefield. Plus, the skill floor is pretty high, so it's definitely not the easiest technique to master. And when it comes to PvP, yeah, it can be pretty useless if you're not coordinating well with the right build. So there you have it. These B-tier curse techniques may not be the top-tier powerhouses, but if you put in the time and know how to use them, they can still make a big impact in the right hands. Keep practicing, and you might just find that hidden gem among the B-tier picks. The cursed techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Gambler Fever, Soul Manipulation, Hydrokinesis, Ratio, and Blood Manipulation. Alright, now let's dive into some of the A-tier curse techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. These techniques are powerful, but they come with their own set of challenges. If you're ready to level up your game, let's break down what makes these CTs so special, and what might make you pull your hair out. First up, we have Gambler Fever. Now this one's got insane all-around buffs thanks to its domain expansion. You've got amazing range, AoE, and a ton of combo opportunities. It's like the Swiss Army knife of curse techniques. But here's the kicker, it requires really good aim to make it work effectively. It can be punished by skilled players, and while it has great gap-closing potential, you're relying a lot on rush to get in close. Oh, and those attack wind-ups? They're long, so you're gonna need to time things just right to land your hits. Next, we've got Soul Manipulation. If you're looking for mobility, this one's for you. It offers solid 1v1 potential, damage immunity, and some pretty sweet crowd control. But there's a catch. Its AoE is kinda underwhelming. You'll need precision with your aim, and good players can punish you if you're not careful. While it has a solid toolkit for staying alive, it can feel a bit lackluster on the damage side, especially if you're up against tougher opponents. Then, there's Hydrokinesis. This technique is all about range and AoE, and it has some very hard-to-dodge moves that will keep your enemies on their toes. It's got some solid combos that can turn the tide of battle in your favor. But, as with many great techniques, it comes with a trade-off: long cooldowns. Plus, when it comes to single-target DPS, it's not exactly top tier. If you're looking to take down bosses or dominate in PvP, this one's a bit underwhelming. Let's talk about Ratio technique. This is a rare curse technique with some serious potential, especially when it comes to single-target DPS. The combos are smooth, and it can be a nightmare for your opponents in PvP. But, as you might expect, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You'll need to rely on other curse techniques for extra utility since it's lacking in AoE and range. If you're a fan of precision and taking down single targets though, this one's going to be your bread and butter. Finally, we have Blood Manipulation. This one shines when it comes to ranged moves and poking enemies from a distance. It can be a real pain for your opponents, especially with the long-range capabilities. But as great as it is at dealing damage, you need a steady hand, because, like Soul Manipulation, you'll be punished if your aim isn't on point. The cooldowns are pretty long, and it doesn't really mesh well with other curse techniques due to the blood orb stacking mechanic. Still, if you can make it work, it can be a very effective tool in your arsenal. So there you have it. A-tier curse techniques, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. If you've got the skill to master them, they can be absolute game changers. Just keep an eye on those trade-offs and always be ready for a challenge. The curse techniques in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Infinity, Star Rage, Demon Vessel, Queen Curse, Judgeman, and Volcano. Alright, let's dive into some of the absolute top-tier curse techniques in Jujutsu Infinite. These are the big hitters that can turn the tide of a battle if you know how to use them. We're talking about techniques that bring insane damage, range, and utility but come with their own quirks. You know, the ones that make you go, "Is this even fair?" when you see them in action. So, buckle up, because we're about to break down what makes these curse techniques the best of the best. First up, we have Infinity. If you're all about range and AoE, this is your go-to. It has massive reach, a ton of crowd control, and even gives you short-term invulnerability. That's right, while your opponents are trying to land hits, you're dodging and dealing crazy damage. But here's the catch. It's got long cooldowns, and you'll need to have pinpoint accuracy to make the most of it. So, while it feels like you're untouchable, you better make sure you're landing your shots. Next, let's talk about Star Rage. This one brings serious AoE power, especially in close-range fights. The guard breaks are brutal and the combos are next level. Not to mention, you've got an OP maximum technique that can leave your enemies wondering what just hit them. The downside? You've got to use those Star Rage skills to build up your meter, and if you don't time it right, the domain expansion doesn't hit as hard as you'd want it to. But when everything clicks, it's chaos in the best way possible. Moving on to Demon Vessel, this one is a beast when it comes to short-range AoE and combo potential. We're talking about an OP domain expansion that can crush your enemies in no time. Plus, guard breaks are a constant, and the cooldowns are short, so you can keep the pressure on. The only catch is that some of your key moves, like Cleave and Flame Arrow, can be dodged pretty easily. Also, you rely on Rush to close the gap, which can be a little tricky if you're up against a quick opponent. Then there's Queen Curse. Now, this technique is a little more tricky, but if you master it, you'll be unstoppable. It can steal techniques, has incredible range and AoE, and can set up easy combos. The short attack windups mean you're always in the action, and the domain expansion and maximum technique are seriously powerful. The downside? It requires solid aim to be effective, and you've got a lot of moves to keep track of, which can make it a bit overwhelming, especially if you're not a seasoned player. But when you get it down, you're looking at one of the best special grade CTs in the game. On the support side, we've got Judgeman. This CT is fantastic for single target battles, with some of the best combos for 1v1 situations. The domain expansion here is incredibly strong and can change the flow of a fight. It's got solid crowd control too, but the big drawback is that it's not great for AoE damage. You'll need other CTs to cover that weakness, and it has long cooldowns and lower range, so you'll need to play strategically. And let's be real, there's a bit of RNG involved with how well it works, which keeps things interesting, but also a bit unpredictable. Finally, we've got Volcano. If you want solid AoE, great range, and crazy damage, this CT checks all those boxes. Plus, its combos are fluid, and you've got constant DPS during the domain expansion. The only real downside is that its single target DPS isn't as strong as you'd like, and again, those long cooldowns can make you vulnerable if you're not careful. But in terms of overall damage output, it's hard to beat when it comes to just laying down the hurt. So there you have it. These curse techniques are absolute game changers in Jujutsu Infinite, each with their strengths and weaknesses. Master them, and you'll be the one leaving your opponents wondering what hit them. Keep practicing, and maybe one day you'll be the one on top of the leaderboard. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.